Hello, public opinion aficionados, and welcome to the Rasmussen Reports channel, where we like to consider ourselves America's sanity meter. Now, today is DEI Day, or Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. And you may not know it, but Rasmussen Reports has a long history of advancing racial narratives in America. We've been polling on racism and race issues for over 20 years. But hang on till the end of the video because we also have more reasons why it looks like Trump might just run away with this election, and you're not going to want to miss it. But let's get back to race and about the kind of questions that a pollster might ask if they don't care what anybody thinks about what questions they ask. And let's take a look at this one. For the very first time ever, we asked Americans, do you agree or disagree with this statement? It's okay to be white. Now, obviously, there might be a lot of stigma around that kind of question, but believe it or not, 72% of U.S. likely voters at least somewhat agreed with that statement, and only 12% disagreed, 6% strongly. And even more interesting, strong majorities of every political persuasion and even every race agreed with that statement. That might be something that's really surprising to you if you're a major consumer of corporate media. And that's a reason why you should follow us on YouTube. Please take a moment to click the subscribe button and maybe even hit the video with a like so more people see it. But let's get into some of the other questions we asked even more recently. Despite all the focus on race in America, believe it or not, only 6% of U.S. likely voters rate race relations excellent, and only 20% good for a combined 26% good or excellent. Now, the number of Americans rating race relations poor is lower than it's been, but it's still a pretty stunning 31%, and a combined 68% of Americans say race relations is either fair or poor. Not only are race relations poor, but race relations, according to Americans, aren't getting better. Are race relations in America today getting better or worse? Only 15% of U.S. likely voters say better, but a stunning 42% say worse. And 36% say they're staying about the same, for a combined total of 78% of U.S. likely voters. But looking at the party numbers, Americans pretty unanimously say that race relations are getting worse. Even Democrats, only 23% of them say better, and 36% of them say worse. But how about those diversity, equity, and inclusion questions I promised you? Here's the first question to set the stage. Are diversity, equity, and inclusion programs making companies better or worse? And over 1,200 American adults asked just over a week ago, 25% say better, but 34% say worse. Another quarter of America says that they don't make any difference. I found these numbers pretty stunning because even though the worst number is only 34%, it's still a pretty stunning repudiation for diversity, equity, and inclusion programs, considering how much media attention and corporate press they've been given. But here are the numbers by race, and I'm pretty sure you didn't expect to see this kind of signal. 24% of white Americans say diversity, equity, and inclusion programs make companies better, but 34% say worse. The opinions of Black Americans are a little bit more favorable to these programs. 32% of Black Americans say better, and 24% say worse. But believe it or not, Hispanic and other race Americans are actually more against diversity, equity, and inclusion programs than white Americans. Here are the numbers by party, and as you'd expect, Republicans are most against these programs. 18% of Republicans say diversity, equity, and inclusion programs make companies better, but 54%, a pretty strong majority, say worse. But look at Democrats. 40% of Democrats say better, and only 18% say worse. But wouldn't you expect a little bit more support there? And of course, independents aren't exactly strongly against DEI programs, but they're certainly not for them, with even fewer independents supporting these programs than Republicans. But that was just the first question. And here's a closer look at the ramifications of DEI programs. Are diversity, equity, and inclusion programs making products and entertainment better or worse? 22% of Americans say better, but 37% say worse. So definitely a bigger spread than the previous question. 26% of Americans say no difference, and 15% say not sure. And again, to the party numbers, Republicans are even more sensitive than before about the impact of DEI programs. 15% of Republicans say that DEI makes products and entertainment better, but 57% said worse. Democrats are pretty close to their previous response. 39% of Democrats say better, and 23% say worse. But again, look at independents. A slightly stronger negative signal, though not nearly as strong as Republicans. But again, like the previous question, even fewer independents support the impact of DEI programs on products and entertainment than Republicans. Now, we asked this question because I thought it was important to get a cross-section of the reach of DEI programs. If you look at your average Fortune 500 annual report, you're going to see a lot of words devoted to these. How familiar are you with diversity, equity, and inclusion policies, usually abbreviated as DEI? And according to almost 1,300 Americans, only 1/3, 32%, are very familiar with the programs. 32% are also somewhat familiar, for a combined total of 64%. 19% are not very familiar, and only 12% are not at all familiar. So it's fair to say these programs have some attention, but only about 1/3 of America is really tuned in. But here's where that data becomes important. We can now use how people respond to how closely they're following DEI programs to whether they think diversity, equity, and inclusion makes products and entertainment better or worse. And to me, the standout is the people who are very familiar with DEI programs. By almost a 2-to-1 margin, those people say that diversity, equity, and inclusion programs make product and entertainment worse. 56% say worse, and only 30% say better. So the people who are really tuned into DEI are much more sensitive to the negative impact than positive impact. But now let's get back to the election. We talked about this a little in our previous video, where we released numbers that show that Trump had an 8-point advantage over Biden. But here's a chart of the historical performance. And of all the times we've asked since the 2020 election, Biden has only been leading Trump one time. And that's in February of 2023, where Trump had just come off the Republicans' underperformance in the 2022 election and hadn't really entered campaign mode yet. But if you look at this chart, it's really hard to say that Biden has a chance. Now, I know you'll point to other reporting by perhaps Axios or someone else that says breathlessly that Biden has a lead in the 8 most recent polls. But go to realclearpolitics.com and take a look at all those presidential polls and get back to me with how many of those are just all adults or registered voter polling. We at Rasmussen Reports poll likely voters because we think it's most accurate. And in the off season, we don't shift to registered voters because it's cheaper. It also happens to give Republicans a slightly bigger advantage than Democrats because people who say that they'll vote tend to vote more Republican than Democrat. Now, looking at this chart, it's important to note that the 8-point lead that Trump currently has isn't his biggest. He actually was leading by 13 points back in the fall of 2021, just after Biden's Afghanistan withdrawal debacle. But what is important here is now Trump has 49%, which is the second highest he's ever had, again, since September of 2021. We, of course, expect Biden to do better than the 41% he has in this current polling as we get closer to the election season. People often say that they're undecided when in reality they really know who they're going to vote for. What people usually don't do is flip. So as Trump approaches that 50% number, it becomes harder and harder, at least according to the polling, for Biden to snatch a win. But here's something that's really spectacular. What you're looking at here is the very first time we asked Trump versus Biden back in May of 2020, compared to the demographic numbers from the most recent time we asked that, a spread of almost 4 years. And Trump is doing phenomenally better with pretty much every demographic. Now, this chart shows the absolute percent change in each candidate's support among every demographic. The Trump gain row is where you want to look at for the sum total of how much Trump's support has shifted since then. Trump has picked up 13% amongst all likely voters, a stunning 16% among women voters. But look at that 18 to 39-year-old column. Trump is currently doing 22% better with younger voters than he was just 4 years ago. But the biggest number here, and the one that deserves the most attention, is that number for black voters. Joe Biden has 33 points less support amongst black voters than he did 4 years ago. And Trump has 23 points more, for a combined almost 56% spread in support in 4 years. And of course, the column for independents is also pretty horrible for Joe Biden, 25-point swing, but nowhere near that number for black voters, which is just cataclysmal for Democrats. As pollsters, we don't just go into the field and ask horse race matchups and expect to be accurate. There are a ton of other questions you can ask, from the generic ballot to voter enthusiasm. This one represents a pretty good view. Have Biden or Trump's policies helped you personally or hurt you personally? This is our attempt to cut through the cult of personality that may be driving people's opinions on who to vote for. Amongst all voters, 28% say Biden's policies have helped them, and 49% say that Joe Biden's policies have personally hurt them. But for Trump, 46% say his policies have helped, while only 34% say his policies have hurt. If you do the math, Biden's underwater by 21 points there, and Trump is above water by 12. So combine them, and you have a 33-point difference between Joe Biden's policies and Donald Trump's policies, personally hurting or personally helping Americans. But the next 3 slides I show you are really eye-popping. First up, how people answer this question who identify as independent voters. And these numbers are horrible for Biden. 23% of independent voters say Biden's policies have personally helped them, less than 1 in 4. But 48%, almost half of all independents, say that Biden's policies have personally hurt them. For Donald Trump, 41% of independents say helped, and 35% say hurt. If you do the math there, Donald Trump has a 21-point advantage. Next up, black voters. Amongst black voters, 33%, or only 1/3, say Joe Biden's policies have personally helped them, but 41% say they've hurt. For Trump, 43% of black voters say his policies have helped them, and 33% say hurt. So more black voters say Trump's policies have helped them than Biden's policies. And if you do the math, the advantage for Trump is 18 points. But I saved the biggest for last. And this is how young voters, 18 to 39-year-olds, respond to this set of questions. 19%, or less than 1 in 5, say Biden's policies have helped them. But 48%, almost 1/2, say they've hurt. And for Trump, 45% of 18 to 39-year-olds say helped, and 30% say hurt. Do the math there, and amongst 18 to 39-year-olds, Trump has a 44-point advantage. Democrats are beginning to lose the youth vote. Stepping back, you have to wonder, with numbers like these, all voters giving Trump a 33-point advantage in this kind of question set, how is he only winning by 8 points? Well, the truth is, when people go to vote, when they go to pull that lever, they're going to be voting for reasons other than the platform. They're going to be voting for what they see in the media. They're going to be voting for personality. They're going to be voting for peer pressure. But even so, this has to be looked at as a resounding endorsement by America of the MAGA platform. If you like this video, make sure to follow us on Twitter at Rasmussen_poll. Subscribe to the channel. Please, again, click the like button or the notification bell so you can see when our new videos come out. Thanks for watching.